Her jealous sisters sold her as a slave, unaware she belonged to the Alpha King's fated mate bond. The chains were cold against Thalia Emberfang's wrists, biting into her pale skin like frozen serpents. She stood on the auction platform, her golden hair matted with dirt, her white dress torn and stained from days of travel in the slave trader's wagon. Around her, the marketplace stank of unwashed bodies and desperation. Yet even in her degradation, even with her beauty dimmed by sorrow, she remained luminous in a way that made the gathered crowd lean forward with hungry eyes. She did not weep. Her sisters had taken her tears along with everything else. The memory burned like acid in her chest. 3 nights ago, Celeste and Morgana had smiled at her over dinner, their faces masks of sisterly affection. They had poured her wine, laughed at her gentle jokes, and when she had finally succumbed to the drugged sleep they had prepared, they had sold her to the slavers who waited in the shadows beyond their father's estate. She had awakened in chains, and the last sound she heard as the wagon pulled away was her sister's laughter, sharp and cruel as broken glass. Now the auctioneer's voice rang out across the square, describing her qualities as if she were livestock. The crowd pressed closer. Thalia felt her wolf whimpering inside her, a frightened Omega creature who had never known such terror. She closed her eyes and tried to retreat into the quiet places of her mind, the meadows where she used to run before jealousy had poisoned her home. Then the air changed. It came first as a shift in temperature, a sudden crackling tension that made the hair on her arms rise. The crowd's murmuring died like candles snuffed by wind. Thalia opened her eyes and saw them parting, fear and reverence etched on every face, creating a path for the figure who approached. He was enormous, taller than any man she had ever seen, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. Black hair fell past his shoulders, wild and untamed, and a dark beard framed a face that might have been carved from stone by an angry god. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and electric, and they swept over the crowd with a contempt so absolute that grown men stepped back as if struck. This was Alpha King Alden Stormveil, and the world seemed to shrink in his presence. He wore black leather and steel, dressed for war even in peacetime, and moved with the contained violence of a predator barely leashed. His scent reached her before he did, pine and smoke and something wild that made her Omega wolf suddenly lift its head in recognition. Her heart began to pound, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Alden stopped before the platform, his gaze finally landing on her. Their eyes met, and the world exploded. The bond snapped into place with the force of a lightning strike. Thalia gasped, feeling it wrap around her soul, golden and unbreakable, singing with a recognition that transcended reason. "Mine," her wolf whispered, and she saw the same stunned realization ripple across the Alpha King's face. His expression shifted from cold indifference to something raw and primal, his eyes darkening to the color of midnight storms. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. For a moment that stretched into eternity, neither of them moved. The marketplace faded away. There was only this connection, this impossible thread that bound them together across fate and circumstance, declaring what they both felt in their bones. They were mates, fated, destined, 2 halves of a whole that had finally, impossibly found each other. Then Alden's jaw tightened, and fury unlike anything Thalia had ever witnessed blazed across his features. He turned that terrible gaze on the auctioneer, who shrank back like paper before flame. "Who?" Alden said, his voice so low and dangerous it seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. "Brought this woman here?" The auctioneer stammered, gesturing toward a weaselly man in the crowd. The slave trader tried to run. He made it 3 steps before Alden's hand shot out, catching him by the throat with inhuman speed. The Alpha King lifted him off the ground as easily as a child lifting a doll. "You dare trade in what is mine?" The words were barely human, edged with the growl of his wolf. "I didn't know, Your Majesty. I swear I didn't know." The trader's face turned purple, his feet kicking uselessly in the air. Alden's eyes flickered to Thalia again, and she saw him fighting for control. The beast wanted blood. The mate bond was screaming for violence against anyone who had harmed her. But then his gaze softened, just fractionally, as it traced the chains on her wrists, the bruises on her arms, the exhaustion etched into her delicate features. He dropped the trader, who collapsed in a gasping heap. "Who sold her to you?" "Two women, Your Majesty. Her sisters, they said. Claimed she was a troublemaker, worth more gone than kept." Something flickered in Alden's eyes, cold and calculating. He nodded once, then turned to his guards. "Find them. Bring them to the castle, unharmed, but unwilling." Then he was moving, mounting the platform in a single fluid motion that made the wood groan under his weight. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, towering over her, filling her senses with his presence. Thalia's breath caught as he reached for her chains. His hands were careful. For all his size and obvious strength, he handled the iron shackles with a gentleness that made her throat tight. The metal fell away, clattering to the platform, and then those massive hands were cradling her wrists, his thumbs brushing over the raw marks with a touch so tender it made her eyes burn. "You're safe now," he said, and his voice had transformed. Gone was the thunder that had shaken the marketplace. This was soft, meant only for her, rough with emotion he didn't bother to hide. "I promise you, little Omega, no one will ever hurt you again." Thalia tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. She had spent 3 days believing she would die in chains, that the last kindness she would ever know was a memory. Now this fierce king, this warrior who made hardened men tremble, was looking at her as if she were something precious beyond measure. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. But when she tried to step forward, her legs buckled. Weakness and days of poor treatment finally catching up to her. She braced for the hard impact of the platform. It never came. Alden caught her, sweeping her into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. She found herself pressed against his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heartbeat, breathing in his scent. Her Omega wolf was purring, content for the first time in days, safe in the arms of its alpha mate. "Rest," Alden murmured against her hair, and there was something almost vulnerable in his tone. "I have you now. I will always have you." As he carried her through the parting crowd, Thalia felt the world shift around her. The marketplace that had been her prison moments ago now seemed distant, unreal, as if she were waking from a nightmare into something too good to be true. But the solid strength of Alden's chest beneath her cheek, the steady beat of his heart against her ear, the warm cedar and smoke scent that enveloped her, these were real. More real than anything she had known in days, perhaps in years. She noticed details she had missed before. The way the crowd parted not just with fear, but with a kind of reverence. The way mothers pulled their children close, not in terror, but in respect, teaching them to bow before their king. The way even hardened merchants and warriors dropped to their knees as Alden passed, and how his step never faltered, his arms never loosened their careful hold on her. "You're shaking," Alden murmured, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "Are you cold?" Thalia realized it was true. Despite the warm afternoon sun, tremors ran through her body, the aftermath of 3 days of fear finally catching up to her. "I don't know," she whispered. "I think I don't understand what's happening." "You're in shock." His arms tightened fractionally, drawing her closer to his warmth. "Your body has been running on fear and survival instinct. Now that you're safe, it's trying to process what you've been through." He paused at the edge of the marketplace, where his massive black stallion waited, held by a nervous-looking guard. "I'm going to lift you onto my horse now. I need you to hold on to me. Can you do that?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. With a fluid grace that belied his size, Alden mounted the stallion while still holding her, settling her across his lap as if she weighed nothing. One arm wrapped securely around her waist, the other took the reins, and then they were moving, leaving the marketplace and its horrors behind. The ride should have been uncomfortable. She had no proper seat, no saddle of her own. But Alden adjusted his hold constantly, making sure she was secure, that the jolting of the horse's gait didn't hurt her. At one point, when they crossed a rough patch of road and she gasped, he slowed immediately, his hand coming up to cradle her head against his shoulder. "Forgive me," he said, and there was genuine distress in his voice. "I should have brought a carriage. I wasn't thinking. I just needed to get you away from there, needed to have you close." "It's all right," Thalia managed, and was surprised to find she meant it. Despite everything, despite the strangeness of being held by a man she'd known for less than an hour, she felt safer than she had in months. The mate bond pulsed between them, a living thing that seemed to whisper mine. Safe. Home with every beat of their hearts. Behind them, the slave trader and the auctioneer were being dragged away by guards, their protests fading into the distance. Around them, the people of the marketplace had knelt, showing respect to their king and the woman in his arms, their new queen, though she did not yet know she would wear that crown. But in that moment, none of it mattered. There was only the warmth of his embrace, the steady rhythm of his stride, and the golden thread of the mate bond humming between them, singing a song as old as the moon itself. She was found. She was safe. She was home. The castle rose from the mountainside like a crown of stone and steel, its towers piercing the clouds, its walls thick enough to withstand sieges and time itself. Thalia watched it approach through half-closed eyes, still cradled in Alden's arms, and felt both awe and trepidation coil in her chest. This was to be her home now, this fortress that spoke of power and wars and a legacy stretching back centuries. Alden had not put her down. Not when they reached his horse, a massive black stallion that could carry them both. Not during the ride through the forest roads, when he had held her against him with one arm while controlling his mount with the other. And not now, as they entered the castle gates, while guards and servants stopped and stared, shock evident on every face. Their king had never shown softness. To see him now, carrying a woman with such careful tenderness, was to witness the impossible. "Your Majesty," a silver-haired man hurried forward, his steward's robes swirling around him. "Shall I prepare the guest chambers?" "No." Alden's voice was firm. "Prepare my chambers. She stays with me." The steward's eyes widened, but he bowed quickly. "Of course, Your Majesty. And shall I summon the healers?" "Immediately. And bring food, water, clean clothes." Alden's arms tightened fractionally around Thalia. Everything she needs. He carried her through corridors of stone and tapestry, past windows that showed glimpses of the kingdom spread below. Thalia felt the eyes of the castle upon them, curious and wondering, but Alden moved as if they were alone in the world. His focus was entirely on her, his steps measured to avoid jostling her, his body warm against the chill that had settled into her bones during her captivity. His chambers were vast, dominated by a fireplace large enough to stand in, and a bed that could have fit 5 people comfortably. Dark wood and rich fabric spoke of wealth without ostentation, strength without vanity. Alden set her down on the bed, as if she were made of glass, then stepped back, his hands clenching at his sides as if he didn't trust himself not to reach for her again. "The healers will be here soon," he said, his voice rougher than before. "They'll tend to your wounds." Thalia found her voice at last, hoarse from disuse. "You're very kind." Something painful crossed his face. "Kind? Little one, kindness is bringing you tea and blankets. What I feel is something else entirely." He ran a hand through his long hair, a gesture of frustration that seemed foreign to his usual control. "The mate bond. Can you feel it?" "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. How could she not feel it? It was a living thing between them, golden and warm, pulling her toward him with a force that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with destiny. "I didn't believe in it," Alden said, pacing now like a caged wolf. "I've lived 32 years without finding my mate, and I'd convinced myself it was a myth, a story we tell ourselves to make sense of the loneliness." He stopped, turning to face her, and his eyes were blazing with intensity. "Then I saw you on that platform, in chains, and every instinct I possess screamed at me to tear the world apart to get to you." Thalia's breath caught. I felt it too, like lightning in my chest. He crossed the room in 2 strides, dropping to his knees beside the bed so they were eye to eye. This close, she could see the faint scars on his face, evidence of battles survived. Could see the way his hands trembled slightly before he fisted them against his thighs. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice dropping to that soft rumble that seemed reserved only for her. "I am not a gentle man. I have killed enemies without hesitation. I have crushed rebellions and burned towns that defied me. The world knows me as a tyrant, and they're not entirely wrong." His eyes searched hers, desperate for her to truly hear him. "But with you, I will be different. For you, I will be whatever you need. Patient, kind, gentle." The last word sounded foreign on his tongue, as if he'd never had cause to use it before. "Why?" Thalia asked, though she knew the answer. She needed to hear him say it. "Because you're mine," Alden said simply. "My mate, my omega, my future, and I protect what's mine with everything I am." He hesitated, then reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek, his palm rough and warm against her skin. "I know you have no reason to trust me. I'm a stranger who happens to share a bond with you. But I swear on my throne, on my crown, on my life itself, I will spend every day proving myself worthy of you." Tears spilled down Thalia's cheeks, the first she'd allowed since her sister's betrayal. "I don't even know you." "Then let me tell you who I am." His thumb brushed away her tears with heartbreaking gentleness. "I am Alden Stormvale, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. I am the sword that defends my people, and the shield that stands between them and those who would do harm. I am feared by my enemies and respected by my allies. But for you, Thalia Emberfang, I am simply a man who would burn the world to keep you safe." The sound of her name on his lips sent warmth cascading through her. "How do you know my name?" A slight smile curved his mouth, the first she'd seen, and it transformed his face from stern to devastatingly handsome. The traitor was very forthcoming with information once he realized the alternative was losing his tongue. Before Thalia could respond, there was a knock at the door. Alden rose fluidly, his expression shuddering back into that mask of cold authority. "Enter." 3 healers entered, 2 women and a man, their arms full of supplies. They bowed deeply to Alden, then turned wondering gazes on Thalia. The older woman stepped forward, her face kind beneath her gray hair. "Your Majesty, we're here to tend to her wounds." Alden nodded, then surprised everyone by pulling a chair to the bedside and sitting down. "You may work. I'm not leaving." The healers exchanged glances but didn't argue. As they began their examination, cleaning the wounds on Thalia's wrists and checking her for other injuries, Alden remained perfectly still, his eyes never leaving her face. When she winced at the sting of antiseptic, his jaw clenched, and she felt the mate bond pulse with his distress at her pain. "The wounds are superficial," the lead healer announced after a thorough examination. Rest, food, and time will heal them. She's malnourished and exhausted but strong. Her wolf is healthy. Good. Alden's voice was tight. See that she has everything she needs. I want her monitored twice daily until she's fully recovered. Of course, Your Majesty. As the healers gathered their supplies and departed, servants entered with trays of food and fresh clothing. They moved with practiced efficiency, setting up a small feast on the table by the window and laying out a silk nightgown on the bed. Through it all, Alden sat motionless, a dark sentinel watching over her. When they were finally alone again, he stood and moved to the table, returning with a plate of food and a cup of water. He offered them to her, and when her hands shook too badly to hold them steady, he didn't hesitate. He sat beside her on the bed and began to feed her, breaking bread into small pieces, offering her bites of cheese and fruit with a patience that belied his fearsome reputation. You don't have to do this, Thalia protested weakly. I want to, Alden said firmly. Let me take care of you, little Omega. You've been alone long enough. The endearment made her heart flutter. She let him feed her, too tired to protest further, and with each bite, she felt strength slowly returning. When she finally shook her head, unable to eat more, he set the plate aside and handed her the water. She drank deeply, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. Better? He asked. She nodded. Thank you. You don't need to thank me. Not for this. Not ever. He reached out and tucked a strand of her golden hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. You should rest now. I'll have a bath drawn for you in the morning, and fresh clothes prepared. Whatever you need only ask. Where will you sleep? Thalia asked, suddenly aware that this was his room, his bed. Something flickered in his eyes, dark and possessive, but he banked it quickly. There's a sitting room adjoining these chambers. I'll sleep there. But this is your bed, and you need it more than I do. He stood, and she saw the cost of that restraint in the rigid set of his shoulders. The mate bond is strong, Thalia. My instincts are screaming at me to claim you, to mark you, to make you mine in every way possible. But I won't rush you. You've been through trauma, and you deserve time to heal, to know me, to choose this of your own free will. Even though we're fated mates. Especially because we're fated mates. His eyes met hers, storm gray and intense. I want you to want me, not just the bond. I want you to choose me, Alden, not just accept the Alpha King because destiny says you must. Thalia's chest tightened with emotion. In the span of a few hours, this fierce warrior had shown her more consideration than her own family had in years. You're not what I expected. A ghost of that smile returned. What did you expect? Someone colder, crueler. The stories they tell of you in the villages make you sound like a monster. I am a monster, Alden said quietly. Just not to you. Never to you. He moved toward the adjoining door, then paused. If you need anything in the night, call for me. I'll hear you. Alden? He turned back, and she saw the hope that flared in his eyes at her use of his name. Thank you for finding me. His expression softened into something that stole her breath. Thank the gods for leading me to that marketplace. I had no reason to be there today, but something pulled me in that direction. Now I know it was you. It was always you. He left then, closing the door softly behind him. Thalia sat in the enormous bed, surrounded by luxury she'd never known, and tried to process the extraordinary turn her life had taken. Yesterday she had been a slave. Today she was the fated mate of the most powerful alpha in the realm. As she finally lay down, letting exhaustion claim her, the last thing she felt was the golden warmth of the mate bond, steady and strong, connecting her to the man in the next room who had sworn to protect her with his life. She slept deeply for the first time in days, and her dreams were of storm-gray eyes and gentle hands. Dawn broke soft and golden over the castle, light streaming through the tall windows of Alden's chambers. Thalia woke slowly, confusion momentarily clouding her thoughts before memory returned in a rush. The auction, the chains, the Alpha King, the mate bond that had snapped into place with the force of destiny itself. She sat up, wincing at the soreness in her muscles, and found a silk robe laid across the foot of the bed. As she wrapped it around herself, the door to the sitting room opened, and Alden appeared. He looked as if he hadn't slept at all. His long black hair was loose around his shoulders, his shirt unlaced at the throat, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of a restless night. But when he saw her awake, his entire demeanor softened. "Good morning," he said, his voice still rough with whatever thoughts had kept him awake. "How do you feel?" "Better, stronger." It was true. A night's rest in a safe place had done wonders. Though her heart was still bruised by betrayal, her body still marked by captivity. "Good. I've had a bath drawn for you." He gestured to another door. "Take your time. There's no rush." Thalia rose on unsteady legs, and immediately he was there, his hand under her elbow, steadying her. The contact sent warmth racing through her, the mate bond singing at even this simple touch. She looked up at him, at this mountain of a man who held her as if she were made of spun glass, and felt something shift in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. His eyes darkened. "Stop thanking me for basic decency, little one. It's the least you deserve." The bath was a revelation. The water was hot and scented with lavender, the tub large enough to submerge herself completely. Servants had left soft towels and soaps, and a dress of pale blue silk that looked as if it had been made for her. Thalia sank into the water with a sigh, letting the heat soothe her aching muscles, washing away the grime and fear of the past days. When she finally emerged, clean and dressed, her blonde hair drying in soft waves down her back, she felt almost herself again. She found Alden waiting in the main chamber, standing by the window, his back to her. The morning light caught in his dark hair, turning it blue-black, and she was struck again by his sheer presence, the way he seemed to command the space around him. He turned as she approached, and the look that crossed his face made her breath catch. It was hunger and reverence, and something so intense it made her knees weak. "You're beautiful," he said, the words sounding as if they'd been torn from him against his will. "I knew it yesterday, even through the dirt and despair. But now, seeing you as you're meant to be, you're breathtaking." Heat flooded Thalia's cheeks. "I'm nothing special." "Don't." The word was sharp, almost a command, and he crossed to her in 2 strides. "Don't diminish yourself. I don't know what lies your sisters told you, but you are extraordinary. I can see it. My wolf can feel it. You shine, Thalia, like a star in darkness." Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Alden's expression shifted instantly, cold authority sliding over the warmth like a mask. "Enter." The silver-haired steward stepped in, bowing low. "Your Majesty, the women you requested have been brought to the castle. They're waiting in the throne room." Thalia's stomach dropped. Her sisters. She had almost forgotten about them in the strange, safe cocoon of Alden's chambers. Now reality came crashing back, bringing with it the sharp edge of betrayal. "Good." Alden's voice was ice. He turned to Thalia, and his eyes were gentle again. That duality she was beginning to understand. For her, warmth. For the world, winter. You don't have to face them if you're not ready. "I need to," Thalia said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I need to understand why." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we go together. But know this, little Omega, They will answer for what they did to you. I will see to it personally. The throne room was a vast hall of stone and shadow, its ceiling soaring high above, its walls lined with the banners of conquered territories and allied houses. At the far end sat a throne of black iron and silver, imposing and ancient, and Alden led Thalia to it, with her hand tucked carefully in his. He did not sit. Instead, he stood beside the throne, his presence alone enough to communicate his power, and gently guided Thalia to sit. When she looked at him in confusion, he simply smiled, a fierce, possessive expression. "You're my mate," he said softly, for her ears alone. "You belong on this throne as much as I do." Then he straightened, and the warmth vanished, replaced by the Alpha King in all his terrible glory. "Bring them in." The doors opened, and 2 women were led in by guards, their hands bound, their faces pale with fear. Celeste and Morgana, Thalia's sisters. They had been beautiful once, dark-haired and sharp-featured, but now they looked small and frightened, their eyes darting around the throne room like trapped animals. When they saw Thalia, sitting on the throne in silk and jewels, their expressions shifted to shock and disbelief. "Thalia!" Celeste gasped. "How are you here?" "Silence," Alden commanded, and the word cracked like a whip. Both women flinched. "You will speak when spoken to, and not before." He descended the dais with the grace of a predator, circling the bound women like a wolf studying prey. Thalia watched, her heart pounding, as he examined them with cold, calculating eyes. "Your names," he said. "Celeste Emberfang," the older one stammered. "Morgana Emberfang," the younger whispered. "And you are sisters to Thalia Emberfang, who sits upon my throne as my fated mate and future queen." The words dropped like stones into still water, and both women paled further. "The same Thalia you drugged, chained, and sold to slavers 3 nights ago." "We didn't know," Morgana said quickly, desperately. "We didn't know she was your mate, Your Majesty. You would never have sold her if you'd known she was valuable to someone more powerful than you," Alden interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "But you had no problem selling her when you thought she was powerless, when you thought no one would care what became of her." Celeste tried a different tactic, her eyes filling with false tears. "She was always so different, Your Majesty, so weak. Our father favored her unfairly. We were trying to teach her a lesson, that's all. We thought a few days of hardship would humble her." "A lesson?" Alden's voice could have frozen fire. "You call slavery a lesson?" From the throne, Thalia finally found her voice. "Why?" The word came out broken, years of hurt compressed into a single syllable. "I loved you. I thought you loved me. Why did you do this?" Celeste's mask slipped, and pure venom flashed across her face. "Because father loved you more. Because everyone loved you more. Perfect Thalia, with her golden hair and her gentle ways. Thalia, who everyone said was the kindest, the most beautiful, the most worthy." She spat the words like poison. "We were invisible next to you, so yes, we sold you. And we'd do it again, because for once we were the ones with power." The admission hung in the air, ugly and raw. Thalia felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness now, but from anger. How much of her life had she spent trying to make her sisters happy, to dim her own light so they wouldn't feel overshadowed? And it had never been enough. It would never have been enough. Alden was before Celeste in an instant, his hand around her throat, lifting her until her toes barely touched the ground. His eyes were no longer gray but the golden amber of his wolf, and when he spoke, it was with the voice of the beast. "You dare admit this in front of me? You dare confess to harming my mate as if it were justified?" "Please," Celeste choked out, terror finally breaking through her spite. "Please, we're sorry." We didn't know what we were doing." "You knew exactly what you were doing." Alden dropped her, and she collapsed to the floor, gasping. He turned to Thalia, and the wolf receded, leaving behind the man who looked at her with such devotion it made her ache. "What would you have me do with them, my mate? Their fate is yours to decide." Thalia stood, descending from the throne on shaking legs. She approached her sisters, who cowered before her, and looked at them with new eyes. They had never been her family, not truly. They had been predators wearing the masks of kin, waiting for the moment to strike. "I could have you executed," she said quietly. "Alden would do it without hesitation if I asked." "Please," Morgana sobbed. "Please, Thalia. We're your sisters." "You stopped being my sisters the moment you sold me." Thalia's voice grew stronger. "But I am not like you. I will not destroy you, as you tried to destroy me." She looked at Alden, at this fierce king who had given her the power to choose. "I want them to serve in the castle. I want them to see what they could have been part of if they had chosen love over envy. I want them to watch me become queen and know that the crown could have been theirs to share, if only they had been kinder." Alden's eyes blazed with approval. "A wise and merciful judgment. It will be done." He turned to the guards. "Take them to the servants' quarters. They will work in the kitchens, the lowest of positions, and they will address Thalia as Your Highness or my queen when she takes her crown. Any disrespect will be met with imprisonment." As her sisters were dragged away, still sobbing, Thalia felt the weight of years of pain begin to lift. She had faced them. She had judged them. And she had chosen mercy, not because they deserved it, but because she refused to let their cruelty poison her heart. Alden was beside her immediately, his arm around her waist, supporting her. "You were magnificent," he murmured against her hair. "Strong and fair. You'll make an extraordinary queen." Thalia turned in his arms, looking up at him, at this man who had defended her, empowered her, believed in her. "I'm not ready to be queen." "Then we'll wait until you are." His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with heartbreaking tenderness. "I told you, Thalia. I will be patient. I will be whatever you need. We have time." "Do we?" She searched his eyes, seeing the hunger there that he held so carefully in check. "The mate bond is growing stronger. I can feel it pulling at me, urging me toward you. I feel it too, like a storm in my chest, demanding I claim you, mark you, make you mine in every way." His voice roughened. "But I will not rush you. You've been through too much to be hurried into something you're not ready for." Thalia's heart swelled with emotion. Here was a man who could have taken anything he wanted, who ruled with absolute power, and yet he was giving her the most precious gift of all: choice, time, respect. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough texture of his beard under her palm. "What if I told you I am ready?" His eyes went dark. "Thalia, what if I told you that when I look at you, I don't see a stranger? I see the other half of my soul." The words spilled out, honest and raw. "What if I told you that the mate bond isn't forcing me toward you? It's simply showing me what I already feel." Alden's control shattered. He pulled her close, one hand tangling in her golden hair, the other wrapped around her waist, and kissed her with a desperation that stole her breath. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fire and need and years of loneliness finally ended, and Thalia melted into it, into him, letting the mate bond sing between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alden pressed his forehead to hers. "Are you certain? Once I claim you, once I mark you, there's no going back. You'll be mine, and I'll be yours, bound in a way that transcends even death." "I'm certain," Thalia whispered. "I want this." I want you." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after a long night, transforming him into something beautiful and dangerous and utterly devoted. "Then let me court you properly, little Omega. Let me show you all the ways I plan to worship you for the rest of our lives." Over the following weeks, Alden kept his word. He courted her with a dedication that would have been sweet if it weren't so intense, so all-consuming. Every morning she woke to find fresh flowers beside her bed, blooms he had picked himself from the castle gardens, his powerful hands gentle as he arranged them. He joined her for every meal, learning her favorite foods and ensuring they appeared at every breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He showed her the castle, his kingdom, introducing her to his people with a pride that made it clear she was precious to him beyond measure. But it was the private moments that revealed the depth of his devotion. The way he would brush her hair at night, his hands careful and patient as he worked through the tangles, murmuring to her about his day, asking about hers. The way he read to her by the fire, his deep voice turning ancient poetry into something new and beautiful, stealing glances at her over the top of the book, as if checking she was still there, still real. The way he held her when nightmares came, and they did come. Memories of chains and her sister's laughter, and the fear that this was all a dream from which she would wake. Whispering promises in the dark that she was safe, she was loved. She would never be alone again. He took her riding through the forest that surrounded the castle, patient as she learned to control the gentle mare he'd selected for her. When she fell, and she did, unused to horseback as she was, he was off his stallion in an instant, gathering her up, checking her for injuries with hands that shook slightly despite his attempts at control. "I'm fine," she assured him, laughing at his obvious panic. "It was barely a tumble. You could have been hurt." His voice was rough, his eyes that dangerous gold of his wolf. "I would raze this entire forest if a tree root had caused you harm." She touched his face, feeling the barely contained violence that lurked beneath his skin, the alpha instinct to protect his mate that was so strong it bordered on madness. "I'm safe, Alden, because you're here. You'll always keep me safe." And she saw him visibly force the wolf back, saw him struggle for the control that came so easily with others, but seemed to flee when she was involved. That was when she truly understood. This fierce king, this warrior who commanded armies, was utterly vulnerable when it came to her. He taught her the castle's history, walking her through portrait galleries of his ancestors, their faces stern and proud. They were strong, he told her, pausing before the painting of his father, a man who looked like an older, harder version of Alden himself. But they were also cold. My father believed love was a weakness, that caring for anyone made you vulnerable. His hand found hers, threading their fingers together. He was wrong. You make me stronger. Knowing you're waiting for me, that I have you to come home to, it gives me a reason to be better than I was, to be the king my people deserve, not just the warrior they fear. In the gardens, he showed her plants from across the realm, explaining which were for healing, which were poisonous, which were simply beautiful. He gave her a section to tend as her own, and she spent hours there, her hands in the dirt, feeling more at peace than she had since childhood. Often she would look up to find him watching her from a distance, his expression so tender it made her heart ache. "Why do you watch me like that?" she asked one afternoon, catching him leaning against a stone wall, his storm-gray eyes tracking her every movement. "Because you're beautiful," he said simply. "Because watching you find joy in simple things reminds me there's more to life than duty and battle. Because every moment I see you is a moment I remember how lucky I am." And through it all, the mate bond grew stronger, twining them together in ways that went beyond the physical. Thalia began to feel his emotions as clearly as her own, his fierce protectiveness, his deep-seated fear of losing her, his all-consuming love that burned like a forge fire in his chest. And she knew he felt hers too, the gradual healing of her wounded heart, the growing trust, the love that bloomed like spring after winter. She learned that he woke before dawn every day to train with his guards, pushing his body to its limits, maintaining the strength and skill that made him feared across the realm. She learned that he handled disputes between his nobles with a fairness that surprised many, that he visited the villages in his territory regularly to ensure his people were cared for, that beneath the fearsome reputation was a king who genuinely cared about those under his protection. And she learned his vulnerabilities, the nightmares that woke him in the night, memories of battles and losses that haunted him. The first time she heard him cry out in sleep, trapped in whatever horror his mind had conjured, she didn't hesitate. She went to him, to the sitting room where he still insisted on sleeping, and found him tangled in sheets, his body locked in the grip of the nightmare. "Alden," she called softly, not wanting to startle him. "Alden, wake up." His eyes snapped open, golden and wild, and for a moment, he didn't seem to see her. Then recognition flooded in, followed immediately by embarrassment. "Thalia, I'm sorry. Did I wake you?" "Don't apologize." She sat on the edge of the couch, reaching out to brush his sweat-dampened hair from his forehead. "Do you want to talk about it?" He was quiet for a long moment, and she thought he would refuse. But then words began spilling out, about a battle 5 years past, about men he'd led who hadn't come home, about the weight of command and the impossibility of saving everyone. She listened, her hand finding his, holding tight as he purged the poison of guilt and grief that he'd been carrying alone. When he finally fell silent, exhausted by the confession, she leaned down and pressed a kiss to his forehead. "You can't save everyone, Alden, but you saved me, and that matters. I promise you, it matters." From that night on, an unspoken agreement formed between them. She would come to him when nightmares struck, and he would hold her when her own demons surfaced. They were healing together, two wounded souls finding wholeness in each other's presence. One evening, as they sat together in his chambers watching the sun set over the mountains, Alden took her hand, and she felt through the bond that something important was coming. Thalia turned to him, concerned. "What is it?" "In 2 weeks, there's a gathering of the Allied Alphas. They come every year to renew treaties and discuss threats to our territories." He paused, his thumb rubbing circles on her palm. "I want you there, by my side. I want them to meet you, to see that I have found my mate, that the Northern Territories will soon have a queen." "Will they accept me?" Thalia asked, voicing the fear she'd been carrying. "I'm just an Omega. I have no title, no power. You're my mate. That makes you the most powerful woman in this kingdom." Alden's eyes burned with intensity. "And anyone who questions that will answer to me." The night of the gathering arrived with the weight of ceremony. Thalia stood before the mirror in her chambers, barely recognizing herself. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue, embroidered with silver stars, that hugged her figure before flowing to the ground like water. Her golden hair was arranged in an intricate style, woven with silver chains and sapphires. She looked like a queen, even if she didn't yet feel like one. Alden appeared in the doorway, and the breath left his lungs audibly. He wore his formal armor, black and silver, his long hair pulled back to reveal the sharp planes of his face. But it was his eyes that captured her, storm gray and blazing with such desire and devotion that she felt it like a physical touch. "You're stunning," he said, his voice rough. "My beautiful mate." He offered her his arm, and together they descended to the great hall where the Allied Alphas waited. The room fell silent as they entered, all eyes turning to them, and Thalia felt the weight of their scrutiny. These were powerful men and women, Alphas who ruled their own territories, who had survived wars and betrayals, and decades of political intrigue. They assessed her with gazes that missed nothing. Alden led her to the high table, seating her in the place of honor beside his throne. Then he stood, his presence commanding immediate attention, and addressed the assembled crowd. "My fellow Alphas, honored guests, tonight I introduce you to Thalia Emberfang, my fated mate, and your future queen." The murmur that ran through the crowd was complex. Surprise, curiosity, some skepticism. An older alpha with gray streaking his beard stood, his expression stern. "With respect, Your Majesty, we know nothing of this woman. What is her lineage, her pack, her strength?" Thalia felt Alden tense beside her, felt the anger that spiked through the mate bond. But before he could respond, she stood, drawing herself up to her full height. If she was to be queen, she would not hide behind her mate's protection. "My lineage is humble," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I come from no great house. I was betrayed by my own blood and sold into slavery. I have known suffering and loss." She met the old alpha's eyes without flinching. "But I am here, standing beside the most powerful alpha in the realm, because fate deemed it so. Because the mate bond chose me. If that is not strength enough, then I would hear what more you require." Silence fell, thick and tense. Then, slowly, a smile curved the old alpha's mouth. "Spirit," he said with approval. "You have spirit, young Omega. That is good. A queen needs fire as well as grace." He raised his cup. "To Thalia Emberfang, future queen of the Northern Territories." One by one, the other alphas raised their cups, echoing the toast. Thalia felt relief wash through her, and beside her, Alden's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. Through the bond, she felt his pride, his love, his absolute conviction that she was everything a queen should be. The feast that followed was a blur of faces and names, of conversations and politics that swirled around her. But Alden remained at her side throughout, a steady presence, his hand occasionally touching her back or her arm, small gestures of affection that grounded her. When an alpha made a comment that could have been interpreted as questioning her worthiness, Alden's response was immediate and cold, shutting down the implication before it could take root. As the evening wore on and wine flowed freely, a female alpha approached them, her eyes kind. "May I speak with your mate, Your Majesty?" Alden looked at Thalia, checking, and only when she nodded did he acquiesce, though he moved only a few feet away, close enough to intervene if needed. "I'm Alpha Sarah of the Eastern Highlands," the woman said, taking a seat beside Thalia. "I wanted to tell you something, woman to woman." "Yes?" "I've known Alden Stormvale for 15 years. I've seen him in battle and in peace, in rage and in cold calculation. I've never seen him show softness to anyone." Sarah's smile was gentle. "Until you. The way he looks at you, the way he moves around you as if you're precious beyond measure. It's like seeing a different man. Whatever else you may doubt, don't doubt his love for you. It's written in every breath he takes." Thalia's eyes burned with tears. "I don't doubt it. I feel it, every moment, through the bond. Good, because he'll need you in the times to come. Being queen isn't easy. There will be those who resent you, who question your right to stand beside him. But if you hold fast to each other, if you let your love be your foundation, you'll weather any storm." Before Thalia could respond, a commotion erupted at the far end of the hall. Guards were dragging in a struggling figure, and as they drew closer, Thalia recognized the weaselly slave trader who had tried to auction her. Alden was moving immediately, his expression thunderous. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. One of the guards bowed. "Your Majesty, we caught him trying to enter the castle grounds. He claims he has information about the Omega's origins." The trader fell to his knees, babbling. "Please, Your Majesty, I remembered something after you took the girl. Something important. Her sisters, they mentioned their father before they sold her. His name is Lord Emberfang of Silverpine." Alden went very still. "Silverpine. Yes, Your Majesty. He's nobility, connected to the old royal line." Thalia felt the blood drain from her face. Her father had never spoken of his past, had always kept their family isolated. But if what the traitor said was true, then she was not merely an Omega from nowhere. She was connected to power, to history, to something greater than she'd known. Alden dismissed the guards and the traitor with a wave, then pulled Thalia aside, away from the curious eyes of the Alphas. "Did you know?" "No, my father never told us. He lived simply, kept us away from politics and courts." She looked up at Alden, confusion and fear warring in her chest. "Does it matter?" "It matters because it means your sisters didn't just betray you out of jealousy. They tried to erase a potential threat to any claim they might make on your father's title and lands." Alden's jaw clenched. "It matters because it makes their crime even worse. And it matters because it means you were always meant for greatness, Thalia. With or without me, you carry power in your blood." "I don't want power," Thalia whispered. "I just want to be happy. I want to be with you." The fierce expression on Alden's face softened into something tender. "And you will be. I promise you that. But your heritage is part of you, and we'll honor it." He took her hands in his. "Tomorrow, I'll send emissaries to Silverpine to find your father and bring him here if he's willing. You deserve to know the truth of where you come from." Thalia nodded, overwhelmed by the sudden revelation, by the weight of implications she was only beginning to understand. But Alden's presence steadied her, the mate bond a constant reassurance that whatever truths emerged, she wouldn't face them alone. The gathering ended in the early hours of morning, with Alphas departing to their guest chambers, treaties renewed, and alliances strengthened. Alden escorted Thalia back to their chambers, his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him, exhausted by the evening's revelations and performances. Once inside, he helped her out of the heavy gown, his hands gentle and careful, then wrapped her in a soft robe. He led her to the bed, but instead of leaving for his own chambers as he had done every night since she'd arrived, he hesitated. "Stay," Thalia said softly. "Please. I don't want to be alone tonight." Something flickered in his eyes, dark and hungry, but he banked it. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He removed his armor and boots, then climbed into the bed beside her, fully clothed. Thalia curled into him, her head on his chest, listening to the steady thunder of his heartbeat. His arms came around her, holding her close, and she felt safe in a way she'd never felt before. "Alden?" she whispered into the darkness. "Yes, little Omega. Thank you for giving me time, for being patient with me." His arms tightened. "I would wait lifetimes for you, Thalia. You're worth any patience, any sacrifice." She tilted her head up, finding his eyes in the shadows. "I don't want to wait anymore." His breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." The words came easily, naturally, because they were simply true. "I'm saying the mate bond has shown me my future, and it's you. It's always been you, even before we met. I'm saying I'm ready to be claimed, to be marked, to be yours in every way." Alden's control shattered. He rolled, pinning her beneath him, his eyes blazing gold with his wolf. "You need to be certain, Thalia. Once I claim you, there's no going back." "I am certain." She reached up, cupping his face, pulling him down to her. "Claim me, Alden. Make me yours." The kiss was different this time. Deeper, more desperate, edged with the promise of forever. His hands roamed her body with reverent hunger, learning every curve, every soft place, worshipping her with a devotion that brought tears to her eyes. When he finally marked her, his teeth sinking into the junction of her neck and shoulder, the pain was brief and brilliant, immediately followed by a pleasure so intense it stole her breath. The mate bond exploded between them, transforming from a golden thread into a blinding supernova of connection. Thalia felt everything: his love, his need, his absolute conviction that she was his missing piece, the one who made him whole. And she knew he felt hers too, the love that had grown from gratitude to something far deeper, something eternal. They claimed each other through the night, again and again, and with each joining the bond strengthened, weaving them together in ways that transcended the physical. By the time dawnlight crept through the windows, Thalia bore his mark proudly on her neck, and Alden wore hers on his, symbols of their mating that declared to the world they belonged to each other. Exhausted and sated, they lay tangled together, Thalia's head on Alden's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. The mate bond hummed between them, satisfied and complete. "My queen," Alden murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "My mate, my everything." Thalia smiled against his skin. "When will we be married?" "As soon as you wish. Tomorrow, if you want. I've waited long enough to make you my wife in the eyes of gods and men." "Then tomorrow," she decided. "I want the world to know I'm yours." "The world already knows, little Omega. They saw my mark on your neck the moment we walked into that gathering. But I'll gladly marry you 1,000 times over if it makes you happy." As they drifted toward sleep, still wrapped in each other's arms, Thalia reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. She had been betrayed, enslaved, brought to her lowest point. But from that darkness had come the greatest gift imaginable. A mate who loved her with a ferocity that defied description, a future that shone bright with promise, and the strength to rise from her ashes transformed. She was Thalia Emberfang, Omega and soon-to-be queen, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. The wedding took place 3 days later in the castle's grand cathedral, a soaring structure of stained glass and ancient stone that had witnessed countless coronations and ceremonies. But none, the older servants whispered, had ever felt quite like this one, charged with such obvious love, such palpable connection between the couple at the altar. Thalia wore a gown of pure white, embroidered with silver wolves that seemed to move in the light, her golden hair crowned with a circlet of diamonds and moonstone. She looked like something from legend, ethereal and powerful at once, and when Alden saw her walking down the aisle, his fierce composure cracked, tears shining in his storm-gray eyes. He stood at the altar in black and silver, his long dark hair bound back with silver thread, looking every inch the warrior king. But his hands trembled slightly as he took hers, and his voice was rough with emotion as he spoke his vows. "I vow to protect you with my life, to honor you with my every breath, to love you beyond reason and time. You are my mate, my heart, my home. With this ring and this vow, I bind myself to you for all our days." Thalia's own voice was steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. "I vow to stand beside you in light and shadow, to be your partner, your equal, your love. You saved me from darkness, and showed me I was worthy of being saved. With this ring and this vow, I bind myself to you for all our days." When the priest declared them married, when Alden pulled her into a kiss that was both tender and possessive, the cathedral erupted in cheers. But in that moment, there were only 2 people in the world: a fierce king and his beloved queen, 2 halves of a soul finally, perfectly whole. The celebration lasted 3 days, with feasting and dancing and joy that spread throughout the kingdom. People came from distant villages just to catch a glimpse of their new queen, the golden-haired Omega who had captured their fearsome king's heart. And Thalia, who had once been told she was worth less than nothing, stood beside Alden on the castle balcony and waved to the cheering crowds, finally understanding her own worth. On the 3rd night, as the festivities wound down, Thalia found herself in the castle kitchens, drawn by a strange impulse. There, scrubbing dishes with rough reddened hands, were Celeste and Morgana. They looked up as she entered, and for a moment, the old fear flickered across their faces. But Thalia felt no triumph, no revenge, only a distant sadness for what might have been, had they chosen differently. "Your Highness," Celeste said, the title bitter on her tongue as she dropped into a clumsy curtsy. "I wanted you to know," Thalia said quietly, "that I've found our father. Alden's emissaries located him in Silverpine. He's elderly now, and he wept when he learned what you did to me. But he also wept with joy to know I'm alive, that I'm happy, that I'm queen." Morgana's face crumpled. "Does he want to see us?" "He wants to see me. He has no daughters named Celeste or Morgana anymore." The words were harsh, but Thalia's tone was gentle. "I'm telling you this not to hurt you, but so you understand the consequences of your choices. You wanted me gone so you could have everything. Now you have nothing, and I have everything. Not because of luck or destiny alone, but because I chose kindness when you chose cruelty." She turned to leave, then paused. "You'll serve in this castle for 7 years. After that, you'll be free to go, with a small stipend to start a new life. That is my gift to you, though you don't deserve it. Use those 7 years to become better than you were. Or don't. The choice is yours." As she walked away, leaving her sisters to their fate, Thalia felt the final pieces of her old pain dissolve. They could not hurt her anymore. She was beyond their reach now, protected not just by Alden's power, but by her own strength, her own worth, her own love. She found Alden waiting for her in their chambers, and the smile that broke across his face when he saw her was like coming home. "There you are, my queen. I was beginning to think you'd been kidnapped." "Never again," Thalia said, moving into his arms. "I have a very possessive alpha who would tear the world apart to find me." "Damn right I would." He kissed her, deep and thorough, then rested his forehead against hers. "Are you happy, little Omega? Truly happy?" "More than I ever thought possible," she whispered. "You gave me everything I never knew I needed. Safety, love, a place to belong. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. You were always magnificent. I just helped you remember it." His hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones with infinite tenderness. "And I will spend every day of our lives reminding you, if you need me to. I love you, Alden Stormvale. I love you, Thalia Stormvale. My mate, my queen, my heart." They stood together in the gathering darkness, the mate bond singing between them, strong and eternal. Outside, the kingdom celebrated their new queen. Inside, 2 souls who had been alone found completeness in each other's arms. And in the kitchens far below, 2 women scrubbed dishes and learned, slowly and painfully, that jealousy and cruelty exact a price far higher than they could have imagined. But that was their story, their burden to bear. This story belonged to Thalia and Alden, to love that conquered betrayal, to strength born from suffering, to a bond that would last beyond the stars themselves. It was, in every way that mattered, a perfect ending and a beautiful beginning. 10 years later, the castle gardens bloomed with late summer roses, their perfume heavy in the warm air. Thalia sat on a marble bench, her golden hair now adorned with a crown of silver and sapphires, watching as 2 children played in the grass before her. A boy of 7, dark-haired like his father, chased his younger sister, whose blonde curls bounced as she shrieked with laughter. "Careful, Kieran," Thalia called, smiling as her son nearly trampled a flower bed. "Your father will have you weeding if you destroy his roses." As if summoned by the mention, Alden appeared on the garden path, and both children abandoned their game to race toward him. He caught them up, one in each arm, spinning them until they screamed with delight. When he set them down, ruffling their hair and sending them off to play again, he approached Thalia with that same look he'd worn on their wedding day, as if she were the most precious thing in his world. Time had touched him lightly. A few silver strands threaded through his dark hair now, A few more scars added to the collection on his body, but his eyes remained the same storm gray that had captured her heart, and his touch was still gentle as he sat beside her, pulling her close. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his hand settling on the gentle swell of her belly, where their third child grew. "Tired but happy." She leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent. "Your daughter kicked me awake 3 times last night." Strong like her mother." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I saw your father in the hall. He was telling the servants about his granddaughter's latest exploit with a wooden sword." Thalia smiled. Her father had moved to the castle 5 years ago, frail but contented, reconciled with his youngest daughter, and devoted to his grandchildren. He had never spoken to Celeste or Morgana again, even when they completed their 7 years of service and left the castle with their small stipends. Thalia had heard rumors they had married merchants in a distant town, living quiet, unremarkable lives. She hoped they had found some measure of peace, but she no longer spent her energy worrying about them. "And speaking of exploits," Alden continued, his tone turning amused, "I received a letter from Alpha Sarah today. Her son wants to know if Arliana is betrothed yet." "She's 5, Thalia laughed. "Tell him to ask again in 15 years. I already told him no. No one is good enough for my daughter." His arm tightened around her waist. "Or my sons, for that matter. They can all remain unmarried and live with us forever." "Alden, I'm completely serious." She turned in his arms, studying the face she'd come to know as well as her own. Even after 10 years, the mate bond remained as strong as that first day, a constant presence that connected them beyond words or touch. She felt his emotions as clearly as her own. His fierce love for their family, his pride in the kingdom they had built together, his deep, unshakable devotion to her. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "That fate gave you an Omega with no title, no power, nothing but a history of betrayal." Alden's expression turned fierce. "Never. Not for a single moment." He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones in that familiar gesture. "You are the greatest gift fate ever gave me. You taught me to be more than a warrior king. You taught me how to love, how to be gentle, how to build instead of just protect." His voice roughened with emotion. "And you gave me a family, a home, a reason to be better than I was. I would live through 1,000 lifetimes and never regret choosing you." "You didn't choose me," Thalia said, smiling through sudden tears. "Fate chose for us." "No." He shook his head, his eyes burning with intensity. "Fate brought us together. But I chose to love you, to honor you, to spend every day proving myself worthy of you. That was always my choice, Thalia, and I would make it again and again." She kissed him then, pouring 10 years of love and gratitude and bone-deep happiness into that single touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard despite the years of familiarity, Alden pressed his forehead to hers. "Come," he said, standing and pulling her up with him. "The children need to get ready for dinner, and you need to rest." "I'm not fragile," Thalia protested, even as she let him support her weight. "No, you're not. You're the strongest person I know." His smile was tender. "But you're carrying our child, and I'm going to take care of you whether you need it or not. It's what I do." As they walked back toward the castle, their children running ahead, Thalia reflected on the strange and beautiful path that had led her here. She had been broken, betrayed, sold into slavery. She had been nothing and no one, with no future and no hope. But fate had other plans. Fate, and a fierce alpha king who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. Now she was a queen, a mother, a partner to the most powerful alpha in the realm. She had built a life beyond her wildest dreams, filled with love and laughter and purpose, and every morning, she woke beside the man who had saved her, who continued to save her every day with his devotion and his gentle strength. The scars remained. The memory of her sister's betrayal would never fully fade, but those old wounds had transformed into wisdom, into compassion, into an appreciation for the precious nature of true love and family. She was Thalia Stormveil, Queen of the Northern Territories, fated mate to Alpha King Alden, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. In the castle kitchens, a few servants who had been there since the beginning sometimes whispered the story to newer staff, the tale of the golden-haired Omega, who had been sold as a slave, only to become the most beloved queen their kingdom had ever known. They spoke of her kindness, her wisdom, her strength in adversity. But most of all, they spoke of the love between her and the king, how he looked at her as if she hung the moon, how she softened his rough edges and made him laugh, how they moved around each other like two halves of a dance perfected over years of practice. It was a love story that would be told for generations, a reminder that even in darkness, even in betrayal, even in the deepest despair, love could find a way. That fate sometimes worked in mysterious ways, bringing together two souls who needed each other desperately, even if they didn't know it yet. And if late at night, in the privacy of their chambers, Alden still whispered the same words he'd said that first day in the marketplace. "You're safe now, I promise you. No one will ever hurt you again." Well, that was between a king and his queen, a promise kept and renewed with every sunrise. Their story had begun with chains and ended with crowns, with love as the alchemy that transformed suffering into strength, loneliness into belonging, and two wounded hearts into something whole and beautiful and eternal. It was, in every sense, a fairy tale. But unlike the stories told to children, this one was real, forged in pain and tempered by devotion, built to last beyond time itself. And they lived happily, deeply, completely ever after. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.